I was 4 miles up Blackwood Ridge, surrounded by ancient pines and the roar of heavy machinery, when the new foreman cut my engine. He didn't just fire me. He stranded me in the mud without a ride, laughing that my 30 years of experience were obsolete. He thought he'd saved a salary. Instead, he triggered a chain reaction that turned $10 million of prime timber into worthless mulch. The air on Blackwood Ridge always smelled the same at 5 a.m., a sharp mix of diesel fumes, damp pine needles, and the metallic tang of cold grease. For 30 years, that scent had been my coffee. My name is Hank Baker, and I knew every root, rock, and ravine in this forest better than I knew the back of my own hand. I was tightening the hydraulic hose on the main loader when I saw the white pickup truck bouncing up the service road. It was too clean. The tires were too black. It looked like a toy placed in a sandbox of mud and grit. "He's here," young Tony whispered, looking up from his chainsaw maintenance. Tony was 19, strong as an ox, but skittish. He had a baby on the way and needed this job more than air. "Just keep your head down, Tony. Let him talk," I said, wiping my oily hands on a rag. The door of the pristine truck opened, and out stepped Brock Williams. He was Mr. Moore, Robert's nephew, fresh out of business school with an MBA that he thought applied to logging. He wore designer work boots that had clearly never touched anything deeper than a puddle in a paved parking lot, and a vest that still had the creases from the packaging. Mr. Roberts, the owner, had been a good man, but his health was failing. He'd retreated to a condo in Florida, leaving the operation to Brock. In the 2 weeks since Brock had taken over, morale had plummeted, and safety checks were being treated as suggestions. Brock walked over to me, bypassing the mud puddles with a little hop that made the veteran crew members smirk. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at his tablet. "Hank," he said, not offering a hand, "I'm looking at the loadout times from yesterday. We're averaging 40 minutes per truck." "That's right," I said, leaning against the loader's massive tire. "The ground is soft on the south ridge. We have to balance the loads carefully, or the trucks will tip on the switchbacks. Safety first." Brock scowled, tapping the screen. "Efficiency first, Hank. Safety is a byproduct of competence. If you were competent, you'd be loading in 25 minutes. My models show that a 25-minute turnover increases our margin by 15%. "Your models?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Do your models account for the clay deposits on turn 4? Because if a fully loaded Kenworth hits that wet clay at speed, it's not going down the road, it's going down the mountain." Brock finally looked up. His eyes were cold, devoid of any respect for the dirt on my face or the gray in my beard. "The drivers are paid to drive. You're paid to load. Stop making excuses for laziness." He turned and walked away before I could respond. The silence he left behind was louder than the chainsaws. I looked at Tony, whose face was pale. "He's going to get someone killed," I muttered to myself. I didn't know then that he was going to try to kill me professionally first. By the second week, the tension on the ridge was tight enough to snap a cable. The weather was turning. The heavy, slate-gray clouds of the Pacific Northwest were rolling in, signaling the start of the real mud season. In logging, rain isn't just an inconvenience. It changes the physics of everything we do. I was in the command trailer, reviewing the harvest maps. We were targeting a massive stand of Douglas fir premium timber worth millions. It was the payout the company had been banking on for 5 years, but getting it out required precision. Brock stormed in, bringing a gust of cold wind with him. "Why is the skidder crew shut down?" "Because the soil saturation is at 80%, I said, pointing to the monitor. "If we run the heavy skidders on those slopes right now, we'll tear up the access road. Once that road is churned into soup, it can't get the trucks up. We have to wait for it to dry out, maybe 2 days. 2 days? Brock's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his orange vest. "We have a delivery contract with the mill in Tacoma. If we miss the window, we pay penalties." "Get the skidders running." I stood up. "I'm not a small man, and years of throwing chains and hauling logs had kept me broad. Brock, listen to me. I've logged this specific ridge since before you were born. If you tear up the road now, you won't get the timber out until July. It will rot on the deck." "You're insubordinate," Brock spat out. "You're always—" No. Mr. Roberts warned me that the old guard would be resistant to change. He said I needed to show strength. "Mr. Roberts hired me because I know how to not bankrupt him," I countered, my voice low. "I'm not running those skidders. It's unsafe for the operators, and it's suicide for the logistics. Brock sneered. I'm the foreman. You're the crew chief. Do as you are told, or I'll find someone who will. He grabbed the radio from the desk and keyed the mic. All units, this is Williams. Resume skidding operations immediately. I don't care about the mud. Move the wood. I heard the reluctance in the operators' voices as they radioed back. I watched out the window as the massive yellow machines roared to life, their tires churning the delicate topsoil into a thick brown slurry. You just destroyed the road, I said, shaking my head. I just saved the schedule, Brock replied smugly. You need to learn that in the modern world, Hank. We don't wait for the weather. We dominate it. He had no idea that the mountain didn't care about his MBA. The mountain was about to teach him a lesson in physics, but I was the one who was going to pay the tuition. 3 days later, the chaos I predicted had arrived. The access road was a disaster zone. The mud was 3 feet deep in places, sucking the boots off men and bogging down the lighter trucks. We were behind schedule, equipment was breaking due to the strain, and morale was in the gutter. I was near the landing zone, trying to guide young Tony as he operated the skidder, a massive tractor-like vehicle with a grapple on the back for dragging logs. It requires finesse. You have to feel the weight of the log, the slip of the tires, the center of gravity. Easy, Tony, feather the throttle, I yelled over the radio. Tony was struggling. The mud was slick as grease. The skidder slid sideways, the massive log swinging dangerously close to a parked fuel truck. Tony corrected it at the last second, sweating bullets. Brock came marching over, stepping carefully on the few dry rocks remaining. He looked furious. Why is he moving so slow? Brock demanded, shouting over the engine noise. He's crawling! He's trying not to slide off the cliff, Brock! I yelled back. The road is gone. We're operating on sludge. He's incompetent, Brock declared. And you're coddling him. Get out of the way. Brock climbed up the steps of the skidder and banged on the glass. Get out, he screamed to Tony. Tony, terrified, killed the engine and climbed down. He looked like he was about to cry. I'm sorry, Hank. It's just no traction. It's not your fault, kid, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. I turned to Brock. What do you think you're doing? I'm showing you how it's done, Brock said, climbing into the cab. You old-timers treat this like it's brain surgery. It's driving a tractor. Any fool can run a skidder. My blood ran cold. Brock, get out of that cab. You're not certified on this equipment, and this isn't a video game. That machine weighs 30 tons. Watch and learn, Baker. Brock sneered through the open door. He fired up the engine, revving it way too high. He didn't check the hydraulic pressure. He didn't check the stabilizer footing. He just slammed the transmission into gear and floored it. The tires spun wildly, throwing a geyser of mud 30 feet into the air. The machine lurched forward, but because he hadn't engaged the differential lock, it immediately fishtailed. The rear end swung violently, smashing into a stack of freshly cut cedar logs. Crack! The sound of expensive timber splintering echoed through the valley. Brock panicked and slammed on the brakes, causing the machine to stall. Silence returned to the forest, except for the hissing of a broken hydraulic line. Brock sat there for a moment, stunned. Then, slowly, he climbed out. His face wasn't apologetic. It was red with embarrassment and rage. He needed a scapegoat, and I was standing right there. You rigged it, he accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. I didn't touch a thing, I said, my voice deadly calm. You just proved my point. You don't know the machine and you don't know the land. You're done, Brock whispered, his eyes narrowing. You're fired. The words hung in the damp air like smoke. You're fired. I blinked, the rain dripping off the brim of my hard hat. Excuse me. You heard me, Brock shouted, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to regain his composure. He looked around at the crew, who had stopped working to watch the spectacle. He needed to assert dominance, and destroying me was the only way he knew how. Insubordination, sabotage of equipment, failure to meet quotas. Pick one. You're done. Sabotage? I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. You're the one who just smashed a $30,000 stack of cedar because you think an MBA teaches you how to feather a throttle on a 60-degree incline. Get your things, Brock said, stepping closer, puffing out his chest. I want you off my site immediately. Company vehicle keys, radio, access badge, now. I looked at young Tony. He was staring at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. He was scared. If he spoke up, he'd be next. I looked at the other men veterans who had worked with me for decades. They looked angry, but they had mortgages. They had families. I didn't blame them for their silence. Fine, I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out the keys to the crew truck and the company radio. I dropped them into Brock's outstretched hand. They landed with a heavy clink. "You're making a mistake, Brock," I said quietly. "Not just for me, for the harvest. You don't know the roads, you don't know the drainage, you don't know the easements." "I have GPS," Brock scoffed, pocketing the keys. "I have digital maps. I don't need your gut feeling or your folklore. I need drivers who listen." He pointed toward the main logging road that wound down the mountain. "Walk." "My personal truck is at the lower landing," I said. "That's 4 miles down. Company policy," Brock smirked. "Unauthorized personnel are not permitted in company vehicles, and since you're fired, you're unauthorized. Enjoy the hike." He turned his back on me and started barking orders at the crew, trying to cover his incompetence with noise. "All right, show's over. Get back to work. Tony, get in that skidder and don't screw it up like your boss did." I stood there for a moment, the cold rain soaking into my jacket. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm before the storm. I turned and started walking down the muddy, churned-up road I had built myself 10 years ago. "Any fool can run a skidder," I whispered to myself, repeating his words. "We'll see about that." The walk down Blackwood Ridge usually took an hour in a truck. On foot, in the mud, it was a 3-hour trek. The rain intensified, turning the ruts into flowing streams of brown water. Every step was a battle against the suction of the mud. As I walked, I had time to think. My anger cooled into something harder, denser. It wasn't rage anymore. It was calculation. Brock thought he had cut off a limb. He didn't realize he had cut the heart out of the operation. I passed the old wooden bridge at mile marker 3. It was a narrow, sturdy structure spanning the Devil's Creek Gorge. I stopped in the middle of it, looking down at the raging white water below. This bridge was the key. Years ago, before Mr. Roberts bought the timber rights, this land was a patchwork of small claims. My grandfather had owned the parcel that included this bridge. When he sold the land, he kept something vital, an easement, a legal right-of-way. It was a quirk of history, a detail buried in 60-year-old county records. Mr. Roberts knew about it. We had a gentleman's agreement. I maintained the bridge, and he let me run the cruise my way. It was a handshake deal based on mutual respect, but Mr. Roberts wasn't here, and Brock Williams didn't know the history. I ran my hand along the rough-hewn railing. Technically, this bridge didn't belong to the logging company. The land underneath it did, but the right to cross it belonged to the Baker Family Trust, specifically to me. I pulled out my waterproof phone case. I had 1 bar of signal. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Law offices of Miller and Baker," a crisp voice answered. "Genesis," I said. "It's Dad." "Dad?" Her tone shifted instantly from professional to concerned. "It's 10:00 a.m. Why aren't you on the mountain? Is everything okay?" "I got fired," I said, watching a piece of bark float down the river. "What? Who fired you?" "Mr. Tubb. Roberts loves you. Roberts is gone. His nephew Brock is running the show. He fired me for incompetence after he nearly flipped a skidder." "I'm so sorry, Dad. That's wrongful termination. We can sue." "No," I said, a grim smile forming on my face. "We're not going to sue. Not yet. I need you to pull the D for the Devil's Creek parcel, the one Granddad put in the trust." There was a pause, the sound of typing on a keyboard. "The bridge easement. Dad, that's ancient. Does it still hold up?" "That's what I need you to tell me," I said. "Because if it does, Brock Williams just fired the only man who can legally let his trucks off that mountain." "Give me an hour," Genesis said, her voice sharpening with lawyerly focus. "I'll check the county clerk's archives." "Walking home?" "Yeah, 4 miles. I'll have hot coffee waiting. And Dad?" "Yeah? Get him." By the time I reached the lower landing where my personal pickup was parked, I was soaked to the bone and covered in mud up to my knees. I unlocked my old Ford, the heater struggling to chase away the chill. I didn't drive home immediately. I sat there, watching the entrance to the logging road. Normally, at this time of day, there would be a steady stream of loaded trucks coming down. The turn, the round trip from the cutting site to the mill, was the heartbeat of the operation. If the trucks weren't moving, the money wasn't flowing. I waited 10 minutes. 20, 30. No trucks. The radio in my truck was a standard CB, but I had a scanner that could pick up the company frequency. I turned it on, keeping the volume low. Static. Then chaos. Stuck on the switchback. I told you I can't get traction. That was Miller, one of the lead drivers. Just push it. Brock's voice cut through, shrill and distorted. Use the skidder to push the truck. I'm not pushing a loaded Kenworth with a skidder on a 10% grade. Miller yelled back, it'll jackknife. We're holding here. The road is impassable. I am ordering you to move. Brock screamed. Fire me then, Miller shouted. I'm not dying for your bonus. I leaned back in my seat, the warmth of the heater finally reaching my fingers. It had started. Without me there to manage the road maintenance, to direct the drainage, to call the stops when the rain got too heavy, the road was falling apart. But that was just the beginning. My phone buzzed. It was Genesis. I found it, she said. The easement is valid. Recorded in 1968, reaffirmed in 1995. Perpetual right of exclusive control for ingress and egress over the structure spanning Devil's Creek. Dad, it's ironclad. The company has an easement to use the road up to the bridge and after the bridge, but the bridge itself, that's private property, your private property. Does it say anything about commercial use? I asked. It says, Genesis paused for effect, commercial transit requires express written permission of the easement holder. Dad, did you give them written permission? I had a handshake with Roberts, I said. Nothing written. Then they are trespassing, she said. Every single truck. Good, I said, putting the truck in gear. Draw up a cease and desist, but don't send it yet. I need to make one more stop. Who? I need to see a man about a debt. A man who controls every timber truck in the county. Sully. Sully's logistics wasn't an office. It was a bunker. Located in a cinder block building behind the county way station, it smelled of stale donuts and burnt coffee. Inside, the walls were covered in whiteboards, a chaotic grid of driver names, truck numbers, and destinations color-coded in red and blue marker. I walked in, shaking the rain off my coat. The room was loud. 3 dispatchers were on headsets, arguing with drivers about delivery windows. In the center of the storm sat Colton Sully. He was a mountain of a man, even sitting down. His left leg was stiff, a permanent reminder of the day 20 years ago when a skyline cable snapped on the North Ridge. I'd been the one to rappel down into the ravine, stabilize him, and haul him out before the mudslide buried us both. He walked with a cane now, but he ran the trucking industry in 3 counties with an iron fist. Sully looked up as the door chime dinged. His eyes, usually narrowed in suspicion, widened. He muted his headset. Hank Baker, he rumbled. You're supposed to be halfway up Blackwood loading fur. Why are you standing in my dispatch looking like a drowned rat? I got fired, Sully. The room went quiet. Even the other dispatchers seemed to sense the shift in atmospheric pressure. Sully took off his headset and set it gently on the desk. Fired? He repeated, the word tasting sour in his mouth. Who fired you? Roberts? Roberts is in Florida. His nephew Brock is running the show. He told me I was obsolete. Said any fool can run a skidder. Sully let out a low whistle. He said that to you? He did. And then he stranded me on the mountain. Sully's face darkened. He picked up a stress ball from his desk and squeezed it until his knuckles turned white. You saved my life, Hank. I've never forgotten that. I owe you a debt that a Christmas card doesn't cover. I'm calling it in, I said, leaning over his desk. Name it. Brock has $10 million of timber sitting on the deck. He needs trucks to move it to the Tacoma mill before the sap settles and the rot sets in. I know you manage the contracts for the independent haulers. Sully nodded slowly. I dispatch about 80% of the fleet in this region. The rest are wildcatters. I don't want you to breach any contracts, I said carefully. I just want you to prioritize safety. The road conditions on Blackwood are critical. If a dispatcher felt that the risk to the equipment was too high, they might reroute the available trucks to safer jobs. Highway runs! Flatland hauling. Sully stared at me for a long moment, a slow grin spreading across his bearded face. He understood exactly what I was asking. It wasn't a strike, it was a safety hold, unassailable, legal, and devastating. You know, Sully said, turning to his computer screen, I was just looking at the weather report. With this rain, the accident risk on unpaved grades is severe. My insurance premiums would skyrocket if I lost a rig up there. He typed a few commands. On the big board, a block of trucks assigned to Roberts Timber Blackwood suddenly blinked and shifted to pending. or reassigned I-5 corridor. It seems, Sully said, looking back at me, that we have a shortage of available heavy-haul units for mountain extraction due to inclement weather. Estimated delay, indefinite. Thanks, Sully. Don't thank me, he growled. I'm just protecting my assets. Brock Williams is about to learn that you don't fire the guy who built the road. For the next 2 days, I sat at my kitchen table, which I had converted into a war room. The rain hammered against the window pane, a relentless drumbeat that I knew was turning the Blackwood service roads into rivers of slurry. I had the scanner running 24/7. It was the only way to track the destruction without trespassing. The radio traffic was a symphony of panic. "Spatchatch, this is Loader 1, came the voice of the operator who had replaced me. "I've got a full deck here. Where are the trucks?" "I'm running out of space to stack." "Lure 1, this is Foreman Williams," Brock's voice replied. He sounded strained, higher pitched than usual. "I'm on the phone with the trucking company now. They're claiming a scheduling error. Keep cutting." "We can't keep cutting, Brock," the operator argued. "The landing is full. If we don't move wood, we have to shut down the processors." "Do not shut down," Brock screamed. "Find space. Stack it higher." I took a sip of coffee, shaking my head. Stacking logs too high on a mud-slicked landing was a recipe for a landslide. It was dangerous and stupid. My cell phone buzzed. It was young Tony. "Tony, it's bad, Hank. Really bad, Hank. We've cut 500 tons, but nothing has left the mountain." Brock is screaming at everyone. He tried to call a different trucking company, but they said they don't have drivers willing to come up here. Me. "Keep your head down, Tony. Don't do anything unsafe. If he tells you to stack over 12 feet, refuse. Side OSHA Regulation 1910-2666. Tony, he's talking about renting his own trucks, hiring scabs. Me, let him try. He won't find anyone who knows how to drive the ridge." I looked at the map spread out on the table. The bottleneck wasn't just the trucks, it was the physics of the operation. A logging site is a conveyor belt. Trees are fell, skidded, processed, loaded, and hauled. If you stop the hauling but keep the felling, the system chokes. Brock was choking the system because he refused to admit he was wrong. He was burning fuel, paying wages, and destroying equipment to pile up wood that was going nowhere. And the best part? He still hadn't figured out the bridge. He thought his problem was logistics. He didn't know his problem was legal. I watched the rain streak the glass. Every drop was costing him money. And I was just getting started. People think wood is non-perishable. It's not. Once a tree is felled, it's a ticking clock. In the summer, you worry about beetles and fire. In the wet season, specifically with Douglas fir and hemlock, you worry about checking and stain. When logs sit in the mud, exposed to the rain but not submerged, fungal spores start to take hold. Blue stain can set in within weeks, degrading the grade of the timber from select structural to utility. That's the difference between selling a log for $500 or selling it for $50. It had been 5 days. Not a single load had left the mountain. I was in my workshop, sharpening a chainsaw chain out of habit when my phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Hank." "Mr. Baker, this is Greg from Tacoma Milling." I knew Greg. He was the intake manager at the largest sawmill in the state. "Hey, Greg. Fun time." "Hank, I'm looking at my delivery schedule," Greg said, sounding confused. "We have a contract with Roberts Timber for 2 million board feet this month. I haven't seen a single stick. My saws are hungry, Hank. If we don't get wood, I have to send guys home." "I don't work for Roberts anymore, Greg," I said, running a file over the steel tooth of the chain. "What? Since when?" "Since last week. New management." "The nephew?" Greg sighed. "That explains it. He called me yesterday demanding I send my trucks to pick up the wood. I told them we're a mill, not a freight company. He started lecturing me about supply chain synergy." "Sounds like him." "Hank, off the record. Is the wood coming? Because if it's not, I need to buy from Weyerhaeuser to fill my orders. I can't wait on this kid." This was the dagger. If the mill canceled the contract, Brock wouldn't just be sitting on rotting wood. He'd be sitting on wood with no buyer. "Greg," I said honestly, "the road is washed out, the trucks aren't running, and the wood is sitting in 6 inches of mud. If I were you, I'd secure that Weyerhaeuser contract." "Damn," Greg muttered. "Okay, thanks for the heads up. Sorry to hear about the job, Hank. You were the best foreman they had." I appreciate that. I unhung up. Brock had just lost his primary buyer. He didn't know it yet. He was probably up there right now, staring at a mountain of wet logs, wondering why the world was conspiring against him. He still thought he could fight his way out. He thought he could bully the weather in the market. He was about to get desperate. And desperate men make fatal mistakes. The rain didn't stop. It wasn't a storm anymore. It was a condition of existence. The Pacific Northwest was living up to its reputation, dumping inches of water onto the already saturated soil of Blackwood Ridge. I watched the local news weather report. Atmospheric river event, the meteorologist called it. A narrow corridor of concentrated moisture. To me, it was just the mountain reclaiming its territory. The scanner was quiet, which was more ominous than the screaming. It meant they weren't even trying to move the machines anymore. I drove into town to pick up some groceries. At the diner, I ran into Old Man Miller, the driver who had argued with Brock on the radio. He was sitting in a booth, nursing a black coffee. "Hank," he nodded as I walked in. "Miller, you look like you've been through a war." "Feels like it," he grunted. "I quit this morning. I couldn't take it." "What happened?" I asked, sliding into the booth opposite him. "He's lost it, Hank. Brock. He brought in these independent guys from out of state. Scabs. Don't know the roads. Don't know the etiquette. They showed up with highway truck sleepers, big fairings, useless in the mud. He's trying to run highway rigs on the upper switchbacks?" I asked, incredulous. "He tried," Miller corrected. "First one got stuck 100 yards in. Sank to the axles. They had to use 2 skidders to pull it out, and they tore the bumper off. The driver was screaming, threatening to sue. It's a circus up there. And the wood? Sitting. There's probably 3,000 tons on the landing now. It's stacked so high it's leaning. Safety officer quit yesterday, too." I shook my head. "He's going to bankrupt the company before Mr. Roberts gets back." "Mr. Roberts isn't coming back soon," Miller said quietly. "Rumor is he had a stroke. That's why the nephew has free rein. No one is watching the store." That hit me hard. I respected Mr. Roberts. He had built this company from nothing. To see it dismantled by arrogance while he lay in a hospital bed was tragic. "Did they fix the road?" I asked. "Fix it. They destroyed it. They brought in gravel, but they just dumped it on top of the mud. It's like quicksand now." "And," Miller lowered his voice, "he's talking about bypassing the way station." "What?" "He's desperate to move volume. He told the new drivers to run at night, overload it, and take the back roads to avoid the scales." "He's going to kill someone, Hank." "The back roads," I murmured. "That means he has to cross the bridge." "Yeah, the Devil's Creek Bridge. It's the only way out if you're dodging the scales." My hand tightened around my coffee mug. "The bridge. My bridge." "Thanks, Miller," I said, standing up. "You did the right thing, quitting." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to make sure he doesn't kill anyone on my property." I called Genesis as soon as I got back to the truck. "Is the cease and desist ready?" "Drafted, signed, and notarized," she said. "I was just about to mail it." "Don't mail it," I said. "I'm coming to pick it up. I'm going to deliver it in person." "Dad, be careful. If he's as unstable as you say. He's not dangerous like a criminal, General. He's dangerous like a child with a loaded gun. He doesn't understand the consequences. I need to make the consequences real for him." I picked up the document from her office. It was a beautiful piece of legal weaponry, stamped with the seal of the county. Notice of trespass and revocation of easement usage. It cited the original deed, the lack of commercial agreement, and the immediate prohibition of any vehicles over 10,000 GVW, gross vehicle weight, from crossing the Devil's Creek Bridge. I drove up the county road toward the bridge. It was technically a public access road until it hit the property line, where it became a private easement. When I got there, I saw the signs of Brock's desperation. The gravel approach was chewed up. Fresh tire tracks, deep, wide ones led onto the wooden decking. He was already running trucks across it. I parked my truck across the entrance to the bridge, blocking the lane. I got out, carrying a sledgehammer and a no trespassing sign I'd bought at the hardware store. I nailed the sign to the main support post. Twack! 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 Then I took a heavy chain from my truck bed, wrapped it around the support pillars on either side of the entrance, and padlocked it. It was a symbolic gesture. A truck could drive through it, but legally, it was a line in the sand. I taped the cease and desist order to the sign, protected inside a plastic sleeve. I sat on the tailgate of my truck and waited. It didn't take long. A rumble in the distance. The grinding of gears. A massive red Peterbilt emerged from the gloom, its stack billowing black smoke. It was overloaded. I could tell by the way the suspension was bottomed out. The logs were piled recklessly high. The driver saw my truck and hit the air horn. Whoom! I didn't move. I just crossed my arms. The truck hissed to a halt, 10 feet from my bumper. The driver, a guy I didn't recognize, leaned out. "Move it, old man." "Can't do that," I yelled back. "Private property. Bridge is closed." "I got a job to do. Move or I'll push you. You touch my truck, and you'll be explaining to the state troopers why you're running an overloaded rig on a restricted easement," I said calmly. "Turning around." "I can't turn around here. It's too narrow." "Sounds like a you problem," I said. "Call your boss. Tell him Hank Baker says hello." 10 minutes later, the white pickup truck came skidding down the road behind the semi. Brock jumped out, his face purple with rage. "Baker, what the hell do you think you're doing?" he screamed, storming toward me. "Protecting my property," I said, pointing to the sign. "Read it." Brock ripped the plastic sleeve off the sign and scanned the legal document. His eyes darted back and forth. This is bullshit. We have an easement. We've used this bridge for 20 years. "You had a handshake," I corrected. "With me. And since you fired me, you fired the handshake. The deed is in my name. The trust is in my name. And right now, you are trespassing." "I'll sue you," Brock shouted, crumpling the paper. "I'll have the sheriff here in 20 minutes. Call him." I dared him. "Please. I'd love for the sheriff to inspect this truck. I'd love for him to see the load weight. I'd love for him to check the dot logs." Brock froze. He knew he was running illegal loads. If the authorities came, they wouldn't just open the bridge. They'd shut down his entire operation for safety violations. "You're bluffing," he whispered. "Am I?" "Look at the tires on that rig, Brock. They're bulging. That's 90,000 pounds. The limit on this bridge is 60,000. You break my bridge, you buy it, and you go to jail for negligence." Brock looked at the truck, then back at me. He was cornered. "What do you want?" he hissed. "Money." "Is that it? You want a bribe?" "I don't want your money," I said, disgusted. "I want you to stop destroying this forest. I want you to stop risking these drivers' lives." "I have a deadline," he yelled. "I have investors coming next week. If this wood isn't at the mill, I'm ruined." "Then you better start helicopter logging," I said, "because you're not crossing this river. You're going to regret this." Brock spat. He turned to the driver. "Back it up." "Back it up where?" the driver asked, exasperated. "It's a mile to the turnaround." "Just back it up." Brock screamed, kicking the tire of the truck. I watched as they began the painfully slow, dangerous process of reversing a fully loaded semi up a muddy, winding road. It took them an hour just to get out of sight. I stayed there until dark, watching the rain fall on the bridge. I knew this wasn't over. Brock wasn't the type to accept defeat. He was the type to double down. He would try something stupid. He would try to find another way out, but there was no other way. The phantom trucks, the illegal overload night runners, had nowhere to go. They were ghosts trapped on the mountain. The cease and desist hit Brock harder than I expected. For 2 days, the mountain was eerily quiet. No chainsaws, no engines, just the relentless drumming of the rain. Then, on Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with text from the crew. "Meeting at the lower landing. Mandatory. He says he fixed the bridge problem." I grabbed my raincoat and drove down to the edge of my property, just within earshot of the assembly area. I stayed in the trees, watching through binoculars. Brock was standing on the bed of a pickup truck, addressing the huddled, wet men. He had a megaphone. "Listen up." His voice cracked over the loudspeaker. "I know there have been rumors. I know you're worried about paychecks. Let me be clear. The obstruction at the bridge is illegal. My lawyers are filing an emergency injunction as we speak. That padlock will be cut by the sheriff himself before noon." The men murmured. They wanted to believe him. They needed the money. "We are resuming full operations immediately," Brock shouted. "I want every truck loaded. We are going to run a convoy. Strength in numbers. If Mr. Baker tries to stop us, he will be arrested for interfering with commerce." It was a bold-faced lie. I knew Genesis hadn't received any notice of an injunction. There was no court order. He was bluffing. He was hoping that if he sent 10 trucks at once, I'd be too intimidated to stand my ground. He was betting on my fear. He was betting wrong. I walked back to my truck and pulled out my secret weapon. Not a gun, not a bat, a folding lawn chair and a thermos of coffee. I set up the chair right in the center of the bridge, on the dry side of the gate. I sat down, poured a cup, and waited. An hour later, the convoy appeared. 6 trucks, engines roaring, led by Brock's white pickup. He was driving fast, aggressive. He saw me sitting there. He saw that I hadn't moved. He saw that I hadn't moved. He saw the utter lack of fear in my posture. He slammed on his brakes 50 yards out. The trucks behind him piled up, air brakes hissing violently. Brock jumped out screaming, "I told you, the sheriff is coming. I'll wait for him," I shouted back, sipping my coffee. "Does he take cream or sugar?" Brock stood there in the rain, his chest heaving. The drivers were watching. They saw his hesitation. They saw that he had no paperwork, no sheriff, no authority. "Turn around," one of the drivers yelled out the window. "I'm not getting arrested for this idiot." The convoy started to break up. One by one, the trucks began the arduous process of reversing. Brock was left standing alone in the mud. His bluff called, his authority shattered. The retreat of the convoy was the beginning of the end for Brock's credibility. But he had one card left to play, the investors. Wednesday brought a break in the rain, though the sky remained a bruised purple. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows navigated the potholes of the lower access road, followed closely by Brock's freshly washed truck. These were the money men, private equity. They didn't know a PV from a canned hook, but they knew return on investment. They were here to see the efficiency improvements Brock had promised in his quarterly reports. I couldn't get close enough to hear them, but Tony filled me in later. Brock took them to the show deck, a small, carefully curated landing near the bottom where the driest, straightest logs were stacked. He had ordered the crew to pressure wash the mud off the ends of the logs to make them look fresh. "We've adopted a strategic stockpile methodology," Brock told the men in suits, gesturing to the wall of wood. "By holding the inventory on site, we can time the market, selling when prices peak in the next quarter." "But the rot," one investor asked, kicking at a piece of bark. "Doesn't the grade degrade in this humidity?" "We have treated the stacks," Brock lied smoothly, "and our airflow management prevents stagnation. This is millions of dollars of preserved capital ready to deploy." He was selling them a fantasy. He was guiding them carefully away from the upper switchbacks where the skidders were buried in mud. He was steering them away from the bridge where the preserved capital was actually trapped. He smiled, shook hands, and pointed to charts on his tablet. The investors nodded, seemingly impressed by the jargon. But then, the lead investor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Sterling, stopped. He sniffed the air. "What is that smell?" In the woods, you learn to recognize it. The sour, fermenting scent of wet wood starting to turn. It smells like damp basements and old mushrooms. It's the smell of money evaporating. Just the organic nature of the forest, Brock stammered. "It smells like compost," Sterling said, narrowing his eyes. "I'd like to see the upper harvest, the source." "The road is slippery today," Brock deflected. "Safety protocols." "I brought boots," Sterling said, opening the trunk of the SUV. "Let's walk." Brock managed to stall them, claiming he needed to clear the area of heavy machinery before they could walk up. It was a desperate delay tactic. But Mr. Sterling wasn't just a suit. He was a tech guy. "No need to walk, actually," Sterling said, pulling a hard plastic case from the back of the SUV. "I want to get some footage for the quarterly presentation anyway." He opened the case and unfolded a high-end commercial drone. Brock's face went pale. "Sir, there are interference issues in the valley. The magnetic minerals. GPS is locked." "Satellites are clear," Sterling said, ignoring him. The drone whirred to life, a high-pitched hornet sound that cut through the heavy air. It shot straight up, buzzing over the treetops. I watched from my property line as the drone ascended. I knew exactly what it was seeing. On the controller screen, which Sterling and the other investors huddled around, the truth was revealed in 4K resolution. They saw the show deck down below, neat and tidy. But then the camera panned up the ridge. It revealed a disaster zone. Acres of clear-cut forest that looked like a battlefield. Skidders abandoned at odd angles in waist-deep mud. The main haul road was a brown scar, completely washed out in 3 places. And then, the camera panned to the strategic stockpile. It wasn't a stockpile, it was a logjam. Thousands of trees were piled haphazardly, slipping and sliding into each other. The sheer weight was causing the pile to spread, pushing debris into the creek. It was a chaotic, unmanageable mess. Finally, Sterling flew the drone toward the river. He saw the bridge. He saw my truck. He saw the chain. He saw the no trespassing sign. He brought the drone back down and landed it with a soft thud. The silence was deafening. "You told us," Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet, "that the logistics were streamlined. You didn't tell us the only exit is chained shut." "It's a minor dispute," Brock squeaked. "A misunderstanding." "That is a legal blockade," Sterling said. "And that wood up there? That's not inventory. That's garbage. You've trapped the asset." Sterling looked at Brock with cold, dead eyes. "Get in the car. We're having an emergency board meeting, now." Brock looked like he was going to vomit. He cast one look toward the woods, toward where he knew I was watching. He didn't see me, but he felt me. The mountain was closing in. The fallout was immediate, but it didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened on my front porch. 3 hours after the drone landed, the black SUV pulled into my driveway. It was followed by a company sedan I recognized, the legal team's car. Brock was in the back seat of the SUV, looking like a truant schoolboy waiting for the principal. Mr. Sterling stepped out first. He didn't look like an investor anymore. He looked like a demolition expert assessing a blast site. He walked up the steps, ignoring the mud on his expensive loafers. "Mr. Baker," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Marcus Sterling, managing partner of Highland Equity. We own 40% of Robert's timber." I shook his hand. It was dry and firm. "Hank, would offer you coffee, but I'm fresh out." "I don't need coffee. I need solutions," Sterling said, gesturing to the porch swing. "May we sit? It's a free country, down here anyway." Sterling sat. Brock stayed by the car, pacing nervously. A lawyer in a gray suit joined us, pulling a thick file from his briefcase. "Here is the situation," Sterling began, cutting to the chase. "We have scrutinized the drone footage. We have reviewed the production logs. And we have reviewed Mr. Williams's unique management decisions." He paused, glancing at the lawyer. "We are facing a total loss of the harvest. $10 million in raw materials, degrading by the hour. We need that wood at the mill. Today." "The bridge is closed," I said simply. "We understand there is a dispute regarding the easement," the lawyer interjected, smoothing his tie. "We are prepared to offer a temporary usage fee. $5,000 for a 1-week access pass." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Ha ha! You think this is about $5,000? Look at the ridge, Mr. Sterling. The issue isn't the toll. The issue is the road." "We can fix the road," Sterling said. "No, you can't," I replied. "Not with Brock running the show. He stripped the vegetation. He ignored the water bars. That road is a river now. If you put a truck on it, it slides. If it slides, it hits the creek. If it hits the creek, the EPA fines you $5 million and shuts you down for a decade." Sterling went quiet. He looked at the lawyer, then back at me. "So, you're saying the harvest is lost?" "I'm saying it's trapped," I corrected. "Unless you have someone who knows how to drain the road, rebuild the base, and walk those trucks down one by one." "And let me guess," Sterling said, a wry smile touching his lips. "You know someone." "I might," I said. "But he doesn't work for Robert's Timber anymore." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Baker, before we discuss rehiring, we need to clarify the legal standing. We have retrieved the original site survey from the company archives. It clearly shows a public access designation for the Devil's Creek crossing." He slid a large yellowed map across the table, and I didn't look at it. "That's the 1985 survey, County Plan B. It was never ratified." "It's the only map in the official file," the lawyer insisted. "Mr. Williams assured us it was the governing document." "Mr. Williams," I said, raising my voice so Brock could hear me from the driveway, "didn't look in the safe." Sterling turned to the car. "Brock, get over here." Brock shuffled up the steps, eyes downcast. "Sir, did you check Mr. Robert's personal safe?" I asked him. The floor safe in the back office? Brock blinked. I didn't have the combination. And I assumed the digital records were complete. Efficiency mandates that. Quiet, Sterling snapped. He turned to me. What is in the safe, Hank? The 1995 amendment, I said. When Roberts bought the timber rights, he knew the bridge was on my family land. We signed a separate agreement. It's not in the digital file because Roberts didn't trust computers with the important stuff. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my flannel pocket. I have my copy right here. I unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map, signed by Mr. Trom, Roberts and myself, notarized with a heavy embossed seal. Read Clause 4, I said. The lawyer leaned in, squinting at the handwritten text. Clause 4. Grantee, Roberts Timber, agrees that easement usage is contingent upon the employment of a certified master logger to oversee road maintenance. Failure to maintain the road to the standards of the grantor Baker results in immediate revocation of access. The lawyer went pale. He looked at Sterling. It's a competency clause, sir. The easement is tied to the quality of the roadwork. Meaning? Sterling asked. Meaning, the lawyer sighed, closing his file. When Brock destroyed the road, he didn't just break the trucks. He legally voided our right to cross the bridge. Mr. Raj, Baker didn't lock us out. We locked ourselves out. Sterling stared at Brock. The silence was heavy enough to crush a rock. You fired the compliance officer, Sterling whispered to Brock. You fired the condition of the contract. I didn't know, Brock stammered. It was an old paper. Who uses paper? I do, I said, and so does the judge. The trap was shut. They had no road, no bridge, and no legal leg to stand on. Sterling stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. He looked out at the rain, which was finally tapering off to a drizzle. He was a businessman. He knew when to cut losses and when to make a deal. Brock, Sterling said without turning around, give me your keys. Sir, your truck keys, your office keys, your badge. But the investors are going to be told that we have restructured management to avert a catastrophe, Sterling said. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Walk to the gate. Call an Uber. Brock's face crumbled. He looked at me, hoping for some mercy, some intervention. I just took a sip of my water. He had humiliated me, endangered my crew, and nearly destroyed the forest. I had nothing for him. He dropped the keys on the table with a clatter and walked down the driveway, his designer boots squelching in the mud. A long, lonely walk. Sterling turned back to me. All right, Hank, you hold the cards. The bridge is yours. The road is yours. The wood is yours. What do you want? I don't want the wood, I said. That belongs to Mr. Roberts. I want to save his legacy. Name your price. I want my job back, I said, with a raise, 20%, and I want full autonomy. No suits on the ridge. No efficiency models. I run the crew. I run the schedule. Done, Sterling said instantly. I'm not finished, I said. I want back pay for the crew you sent home. And I want young Tony promoted to lead skidder operator. He's got the touch. He just needs confidence, greed. And one more thing, I said, leaning forward. That wood on the deck? It's rotting. The only way to get it out before it spoils is to run 24/7 operations for the next 3 weeks. That means overtime. Double time for night shifts. You authorize an unlimited overtime budget until the deck is clear. The lawyer flinched. That will eat into the profit margin significantly. There is no profit margin right now, I reminded him. Right now, you have a $10 million loss. I'm offering you a chance to break even. Sterling looked at me with newfound respect. He realized I wasn't gouging him. I was saving him. You have your budget, Hank, Sterling said, extending his hand again. Get it done. I shook it. I'll make the call. I pulled out my radio, the one I kept in my truck. I turned it on. All units. This is Baker. Break time is over. Fire up the heaters. We're going back to work. I didn't just unlock the gate. I mobilized an army. Within 2 hours, Sully had 6 specialized off-road haulers idling at the bottom of the ridge. These weren't the shiny highway queens Brock had hired. These were battle-scarred Kenworths, with chains on every tire, and drivers who chewed tobacco and spat grit. I took the lead in a bulldozer. The road was a disastrous slurry of clay and rock. Brock's gravel fix had just created a layer of ball bearings over the mud, We had to scrape it all off, down to the hard pan, and rebuild the drainage ditches he had filled in. It took us 3 days of nonstop work just to make the road passable. We worked under floodlights, the rain finally easing into a cold mist. When we reached the upper landing, the smell hit us. It was stronger now. The fermentation I had warned about. I walked over to the massive stacks of Douglas fir. I took a hatchet and chipped the bark off a log near the bottom. The wood underneath wasn't the creamy white it should be. It was streaked with gray. Blue stain. It's starting, I told Tony, who was standing beside me. The fungus is in the sapwood. Can we save it? Tony asked. If we get it to the kiln in 48 hours, the heat will kill the fungus and stop the spread. If it sits here for another week, it's firewood. We had 5,000 tons of wood to move. 48 hours. Load 'em up, I yelled. The operation that followed was a ballet of heavy metal. The loaders swung the logs onto the trucks with desperate speed. The trucks ground their way down the mountain, crossing my bridge, the only lifeline, one by one. At the mill, Greg kept the intake gates open all night. They were sawing the logs as fast as we could deliver them, stripping the stained outer layers to salvage the structural core. We lost about 20% of the volume to rot. That's $2 million of value, gone forever because Brock didn't want to listen, but we saved $8 million. As the last truck rolled out, I stood on the empty landing. The ground was scarred, the trees were gone, but the forest was quiet again. We'd cleaned up the mess. But the real cost wasn't just the wood, it was the reputation. Mr. Roberts' company, once the gold standard, was now the one that almost lost it all. That stain is harder to wash off than mud. A week later, the final accounting came in. Sterling called me to the main office. The mood was somber. The walls, once covered in awards and safety excellence plaques, felt bare. We ran the numbers, Sterling said, sliding a balance sheet across the desk, and we broke even. Barely. Between the overtime, the road repairs, the legal fees, and the devaluation of the stained timber, the profit for this harvest is zero. Better than negative 10 million, I pointed out. True, Sterling admitted. But investors don't like zero. They like growth. He leaned back in his chair. We're selling the company, Hank. Highland Equity is divesting. We can't manage an asset this volatile. My heart sank. Who's buying? Weyerhaeuser made an offer for the land, but not the equipment, not the crew. So, everyone is out of a job, I asked, thinking of Tony and his new baby. Likely, Sterling said. Unless what? Unless what? Unless there's a local buyer. Someone who knows the land. Someone who holds the easement that makes the land valuable. He looked at me pointedly. You want me to buy it? I laughed. I have a logging truck and a retirement fund. I don't have $10 million. You don't need 10 million, Sterling said. The land is worthless without the access rights which you control. That depresses the value significantly. We are willing to structure a leveraged buyout. You put up your equity, the bridge, your easement, and we finance the rest against future harvests. I stared at him. He was offering me the company, not as a foreman, but as the owner. Why? I asked. Because you're the only one who can run it without destroying it, Sterling said. And, frankly, I never want to see a mud report again. I drove home that night in a daze. I talked to Genesis. I talked to Sully. Do it, Sully said. I'll give you favorable rates on the trucking. We'll be partners. Do it, Genesis said. I'll handle the contracts. No more loopholes. I thought about Brock. He was gone, scrubbed from the industry. His arrogance had burned down the castle, but from the ashes, I had the chance to build something better. I called Sterling the next morning. I'll take it. But the name changes. No more Roberts Timber. What will you call it? Baker and Son. And daughter. Logging. You know, folks, a lot of people think power comes from a title. They think because they have manager or CEO on their business card, they own the truth. That I learned something up on that ridge that I want to pass on to you. Brock's mistake wasn't that he was young or educated. It was that he confused authority with knowledge. He thought he could command respect without giving it. And I made a mistake too. I waited too long to stand up. I let him push me until my back was against the wall. I should have drawn the line the moment he compromised safety. Real ownership isn't about what's on the deed. It's about who shows up when it's raining. It's about who knows where the soft spots in the road are. The person who holds the keys isn't always the person who holds the power. In my case, The power was in a dusty old piece of paper and 30 years of goodwill. Always understand what you bring to the table that no one else can. Is it a skill, a relationship, a legal right? Identify it and protect it. Handshakes are for friends, contracts are for business. If I hadn't had that map in the safe, I'd be just another fired old man. Keep your records. Respect the old guard. If you're new to a job, shut your mouth and open your eyes. The guy sweeping the floor might know more about the building's foundation than the architect.